Well, let me begin by offering just a little bit of prayer. Speak, Lord. We long to hear your voice. Our world, our lives need the wisdom that only you can offer. Guide us, care for us, challenge us, and renew us. In this time and in every day, we ask for your guidance. Amen. So last week, does anybody remember what we were up to last week?
That's more than 2 days ago.
I know.
We talked about the parable of the landowner hiring the people at different times and paying them the same.
Yes. Yeah, we were hanging out in the vineyard and we had however we're going to call it, the parable of the surprise salaries, the generous landowner, the angry tenants, however you want to put it. Did it change how was there anything that did that pop up in your mind at all throughout the week at all, or was there anything that stuck with you from that?
Not really, and I even went back and read over it. And it just, what we covered made sense.
Well, good. And we had some good discussion last time. We had some really good discussion. Well, let's see here. So today we are going to finish up chapter 20. And we've been talking for a while that that Jesus is getting closer and closer to Jerusalem. And when we finish today, Jesus will be right outside of the gates of Jerusalem, getting ready. He'll be looking for a donkey and some palms. So we're going to get everything that leads us right up to that. So would somebody be willing to read Matthew 20, verses 17 through 23?
I can. Now, as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside and said to them, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will turn him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life." Then the mother of Zebedee's son came to Jesus with her sons and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. "What is it that you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father."
Thank you, Kathy. So we start with Jesus. As they're going up to Jerusalem. He kind of has a huddle with his disciples, and he's trying to prepare them for what they're about to face. Has there been a time that you've had to prepare for something that you knew was going to be big enough that you needed to have maybe not a literal but a metaphorical huddle with your inner circle? Has there ever been a time that you've really needed to kind of circle up the wagons before?
Isn't this like the third time that he's predicted his death?
I believe you're right. It's something about that. It's definitely not the first. Yeah, maybe he's a little bit of a communications guru. A reminder that you have to hear something 7 times before you really soak it in. He's continuing to. I will always think that is the ice cream truck, and I'll get really excited. But yeah, he's reminding them You're absolutely right, Ron. Of something he's already told them, but he really wants it to sink in. Good. What else do you notice in this?
Well, the mother of Zebedee's sons comes and asks him, one can sit on the right and one can sit on the left. And he has to tell her that's really not his choice, it's God's choice as to who gets to sit there.
Yeah, now that's an interesting, what do you think Jesus was doing? Do you think he was being honest? Do you think he was kind of deflecting? Was he punting the answer? Why would Jesus say that he doesn't even have the authority to decide who's at his right and at his left? And he, she's asking, and that, which was interesting that she would, oh, hi, Sherry, that she would also ask for at the left because, at the right-hand side is your, in any kind of banquet setting in Jesus's world would by far be, you would almost be better off being right hand and then next to the guy at the right hand than you would at the left hand. But, she's trying to talk about proximity, about who's closest to Jesus. Why would Jesus say that isn't up to him? And why do you think he's saying that, asking, do you, are you able to drink of this cup that I'm about to drink from?
Is it about his submission to the Father? Because he's soon to die.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, the parallels of, like, he has just gotten done telling his crew that he is heading to Jerusalem, and the kind of crowning he's going to get is one of crucifixion. And yet, it's in this same moment that I don't know whether James and John put their mom up to it, or if she's just kind of a helicopter parent, or what's going on, but why at that point would you say, by the way, we want to get close to that? We need to be next in line. I mean, I guess it's kind of like, there are certain things that are still seen as honorific, but probably aren't a lot of fun. I mean, God bless Joe Biden, or, anybody who wants to be president or to be in any sort of elected office. I'm assuming it's not all sunshine, roses, and walks in the park. That's got to be a hard thing to sign up for. What might appear to be honorific to some is probably also an insanely difficult job. And a task that requires the best of yourself. Not just in a political sense, but, I've just always been perplexed as to why James and John's mom shows up at this moment.
Yeah. I think you're right. She's a helicopter mom. I hadn't thought of that before.
I don't know what the Hebrew for helicopter mom is, but sure it's somewhere in there.
Just a yenta. Just a yenta.
And maybe James and John wanted to ask Jesus, but they didn't, maybe they were afraid to. So maybe, the audacity comes from the parents, from the mom. So maybe that's there. But that is pretty bold that they respond to Jesus to say, well, I guess Jesus says to them that you will indeed drink my cup. What does he mean by that?
That they're going to go through some tough times also.
Yep. Yeah, that even though, and both, correct me if I'm wrong, both James and John were crucified, weren't they? or at least martyred. I don't really, I can't
I'm
remember.
not sure.
I know that James, it was said, made it all the way to Spain, and made it to Spain. And John, in the Gospel of John, was the one that ends up caring for Jesus's mother. Isn't he the one that, that beautiful scene at Jesus' crucifixion in the Gospel of John, woman, here's your son, son, here is your mother. And it's John, the apostle. So we'll, I thought so, but, oh, now
Do you
see,
think-
now I'm really curious about who that is.
Do you have a commentary, Steve, there?
It's not that exciting. Yeah, it doesn't really have. So it talks about the cup as a metaphor for that which is allotted by God, whether blessing or judgment. Here it refers to Jesus' suffering and death. So, there isn't a whole lot of added commentary on there, but
Do you think they really understood what his cup might entail when they said, we are able? Or they're just kind of like, oh yeah, we can do it, whatever.
yeah, what do you think? Do you think they actually had, were they prepared? Do you think they had counted the costs?
Well, how prepared can you be? To me, if they really grasped it, they'd be overwhelmed.
That's kind of what my thought is, kind of like, not sure they really quite got the whole thing. They were just ready to be, they thought they could, but you don't really know what you're signing up for sometimes. So.
Has there ever been something that you signed up for in your life that you ended up maybe getting more than you bargained for? Maybe it,
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, I was thinking the same thing too. I mean, yeah. I think marriage is one of those things that tries us. It's that refiner's fire, that thing that continually, it isn't a one and done, once you say the vows, that it's all sunshine and roses. It's a good thing we don't have any like newlyweds on this call.
Okay. You're thinking of
We're still
marriage.
drinking
Yeah.
the cup.
Were you thinking of marriage, Dan?
What's that?
Were you thinking of marriage or of Kathy's teaching?
I was thinking of marriage, and I got more than I signed up for, that's for sure.
I think he means just in the good ways.
I hope so.
But yeah, I mean, I could understand why that's something that we think of in that. I think that's a great example. Have there been other things in your life that required more of you than you maybe even anticipated?
Joining the army.
Marrying a soldier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know how it would change him. We were just young college kids when we met, so we were both pretty green. And I was just going along for the ride,
And right it was too for a couple of years.
It was rough. It was a hard time to be apart, and then for Ron to come home, and we had to really work at our relationship after that because his mind was still back there in Vietnam, and just embracing again the love that we had, but also building it in a new fashion because we weren't kids anymore. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think with I think any relationship of love, requires vulnerability, and that vulnerability requires a letting go. I think I understand a little bit why some kind of older translations talk a lot about submission, about how you sacrifice for your partner and for the relationship, and you work, hopefully it's a shared sacrifice and shared reward. There'll be seasons where one really leads the way, and there'll be other times where the other partner really leads the way in growth. Yeah, so that's absolutely a great example. Well, let's keep reading, because this story kind of there isn't a common theme. Oftentimes in our studies I'll try and group together themes, but this is kind of wrapping up and just closing down this middle chapter. Really the Gospel of Matthew can be broken down into three main acts. You have your first act, which is Jesus's birth and the beginning, the lead up into his ministry. The middle bulk of it is that the journeys around Judea and all leading to Jerusalem, and then the final act is everything in Jerusalem and his death and resurrection. So we're just kind of wrapping up the end of the second act here. So it may feel a little scattered shot, because I think the gospel writer was really trying to, collect up any loose ends and tie them all together. So would somebody read the final 10 verses, verse 24 through 34?
When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with two mothers. Two brothers. I'm having a hard time seeing this. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be the first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve you, and to give his life as a ransom for many." As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. Two blind men were sitting along the side of the road, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet, but they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight and followed him.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. So that first section, that 24 through 28, is really Jesus kind of setting up what does it mean to be great in Jesus's eyes. So what does it mean? What do you think he's trying to say?
Service to others.
Yeah, service to others. How, do you think they got it? Do you think they understood?
No.
Well, it's hard to determine, because really there's nothing in here that it explains it at this point in time.
Jesus speaks from the frame of reference that his life is a sacrifice poured out. Ours is we don't even envision that in our life. I don't think of my life as a sacrifice poured out.
I mean, it does. I mean, Sherry, you bring up a really good point. I mean, this is like the ultimate question of like, what are our lives for? And that's a big thing. Have you ever had a season or an epiphany or some time where you've really had to say like, all right, what am I on this earth to do? Or what's my lasting legacy? Or what's, you know, why am I here and what am I going to do with this life? How did you respond? Or are you still in the, I guess we're all still in the midst of answering that, aren't we? And we get to every day.
Yeah, we don't know quite what's going to be asked of us in the future. We see how God has moved us through our maturing years, and what he had us doing when we started was pretty simple stuff. But now look at the sacrifices that have been made over the years for the sake of the body, but also for our love for Christ. It's still an unknown thing to me. I don't know what more he might ask. It could be anything.
Yeah.
Those verses remind me of Mother Teresa. Just thinking about her life and what she did.
That's a, you know, so Kathy, literally the next question I wanted to ask you just perfectly led into it. You know, if Jesus is talking about servant leadership, what are some examples that come to mind for you for servant leadership? And I think Mother Teresa is a great way to start. And whether you're thinking both, you know, a big public figure like her, or maybe just somebody in your life, who are some other examples? And what to you made them a servant leader? You know, what was it that really spoke to that quality?
I guess I haven't had any great epiphanies. Don't really know.
I always, I am one of the people I really admire and really love is Becca Stevens. And she's the one I've talked a few times in the past about Thistle Farms. That it's the kind of fundraising arm for this recovery house for women coming out of jail for prostitution and prostitution or addiction, because oftentimes those things are so closely linked. And then anyways, she runs this, not only this community that gives women 2 free years of recovery and but also works to get them sustainable jobs connected to, they have a line of beauty products called Thistle Farms. And it's really cool. And, you know, that's what she like the story of, and the story of Thistle Farms is because it comes from, you know, thistle is a weed, but it's also and it oftentimes grows in the cracks and in the, you know, it's one of those few weeds that you'll see in a lot of urban areas that'll still find a way to grow up in cracks. And it when it blooms, it's beautiful. Those beautiful like indigos and lavender and purple colors that just are gorgeous. But it's also a medicinal weed. And so, you know, she kind of applies that to the stories of many of the women that they help, that hope kind of springs up through cracks. But anyways, her whole call to this started when she went to go visit, she was a pastor and she was visiting a congregant in jail. And it just so happened that she went into the county prison and she looked around, and everyone from from a lawyer who was there visiting a client, the person her parishioner she was going to visit, she herself, one of the people who was working as a guard at the prison, they were all in the same class in high school, and they all knew each other in high school, and that their lives could have gone so different ways. And so for her, it was that call that, like, we are all one, and that, like, through different circumstances, that their roles all could have been changed. You know, while she was the pastor coming in from the outside, she just as easily could have been that person that she was in there visiting. And some of the other roles could have been switched. And so for her, it was that sense of she felt the desire to make sure that the people who were coming out of prisons and in the prisons knew that they were loved and that they weren't othered, and that they had an important story to share and gifts to share as well. And so it kind of compelled her to do that kind of leadership. So
you don't find many ministers that would do something like that, because first of all, the congregation is going to look down on them, and they're not going to be too happy that the ministers out there helping prostitutes after they come out of jail. That's just like a revolving door. They go in, they come out, they go in, they come out, and trying to figure out how to get them off of that track is even more difficult, because they have to have a job that, you know, pays them well. And usually people like that are very low skilled, so they end up getting the lowest job on the rung on the ladder, minimum wage. So they just say to heck with it and go right back to being a prostitute because it pays so much more money.
And so, I mean, and that's, Ron, you kind of hit the nail on the head, which is why she felt compelled to say, well, we can't just go and visit. Can't just go and visit and then offer a safe space afterwards. There has to be that economic component as well. And so hence how they created this whole cyclical, holistic way of rehabilitation. So yeah, you're right. It did take some creativity and some unique skills.
And also knowing what the economic situation was and what you had to do to get them to the point where they could actually get a job that paid some good money. So that's why they had up to 2 years to stay there.
Yeah. So any other examples, thanks for letting me share that, but any other examples of servant leadership or somebody that comes to mind to you when you think of that?
Well, I think any of the ministers who run things like, slipped my mind now. Pastor Tom Barber, I can't even remember where
People City Mission, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a great example.
Mhm.
and things like that. You don't find a lot of people out there, but you see them. If you look, you'll see them. But if you don't look, you don't really recognize what's going on.
You know, and I think that's, I don't know about for you, I mean, at least for the last 2 weeks, when we've started most of our conversations talking about politics and frustrations and the craziness, I need to focus more. It's so easy to focus on all the bad, the selfish, I need to see some examples of that great leadership, those servant leaders who, and to be able to have that hope. I don't know if this is connected, but I mean, I was, our worship team, we've been talking about, all right, what do we do with Advent? And do we acknowledge that, like, yeah, this is going to be a weird Christmas for many of us. It might be a hard Christmas because maybe we're going to have to change our family practices. Maybe we're going to have to change our communal worship. But, we also talked about how, like, if there's a time when we need the promise of peace, hope, love, and joy of Christ, it's now more than ever. And how can we help make that real for folks wherever they are? And so we've been kind of trying to figure out that tension as well. And so, we need that servant leadership. And for Christians, we say that Jesus is our ultimate model for it. And here he is telling those disciples, here's what it looks like. And in just a few days, he will show them. I mean, he has continued to show them, but he will show the ultimate degree to which he's willing to go. So the last little section here, verses 29 through the end, this story is told a few different ways. Matthew is the only one where there's two different blind men sitting by the roadside. And remember, throughout the Gospel of Matthew, that the author of Matthew has used things like sight and hearing, not only to talk about the literal abilities, but also talking about their metaphorical equivalents to understanding and wisdom, right? That oftentimes when Jesus talks about do you see, it's not only about do you have physically 20/20 sight, but do you comprehend? Do you get it? And so here we have Jesus and these two blind men. What do you notice about how they engage Jesus? What do they call him? What do they ask for?
Well, they call him Son of David, and they just ask him for their sight
And mercy.
and mercy. Okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about mercy and the title that they give him of Son of David. Can anybody remember? So what is this about Son of David?
Well, didn't one of the prophets say that that's where the Messiah would come from? He would come from the line of David?
Come from the line of David, absolutely. And this was also connected to, not just the Messiah, but this was especially connecting it to like a royal lineage, that the Messiah would not only be the liberator, but when you throw in the Son of David honorific title, that's really talking about somebody who's going to be the new king. You're taking on whatever powers and you are going to be the new king. And so no wonder the crowd, in verse 31, the crowd sternly ordered them to be quiet. I mean, they're right outside of the capital city, and these people on the roadside are essentially shouting campaign slogans. They're really doing that. And so let's talk about mercy too. Why do you think they're asking? Because Kathy, you're right, that they do get sight, but they start by asking for mercy. Why do you think they were appealing for mercy?
Well, because they're looked down on by society, because they're blind, they can't do anything. They basically are sitting alongside the street with a little tin cup asking for alms. And so what they're asking for is for Jesus to take mercy on them and give them their sight back so they can do something productive. And most of the people and most of the population don't give them mercy. Is that right?
You kind of got it all, Ron. You kind of got it all. Yeah, that they recognized their vulnerability and they needed Jesus. They knew that Jesus had, or I don't know if they knew it, but that's what Jesus has been preaching. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Jesus has been on and on. It's been a ministry of mercy, mercy and compassion. And so Jesus gives them that. And then they do ask to have it's interesting, because I can't remember who was reading, but in my translation, in that verse, verse 33, they ask for their eyes to be opened. I think whoever read it said that they asked for sight, let us see, or something like that. But let our eyes be opened. So not only do they get physical sight, but it appears that they have some sort of comprehension and some sort of commitment to Jesus. And so how do they respond?
I don't see it in there how they responded.
It says they followed him.
Yeah. So moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes. Immediately they regained their sight and they followed him.
Hmm.
So this is both that physical healing and that emotional restorative, that spiritual restorative touch of Jesus that allows them to follow in his path. And here we are as they're going into Jerusalem, getting ready for what would become Palm Sunday, and they are following right into the midst of this. It's a crazy time to be following Jesus, then and now. So
I think it's kind of interesting that as you're reading through this, they were blind, and so you just assume that everyone would know what they wanted. If you're blind, you want your sight, probably, even though they had a lot of other needs, I'm sure. But Jesus, I think it's interesting that he had them ask what they wanted, because I'm sure he knew. But he says, what do you want me? So just kind of the correlation of asking God, for things and how maybe that is very important that we ask.
Oh, I love that, Dan. I love that. Yeah, that Jesus doesn't, Jesus really gives, I think you're right, that even the crowd probably assumed that they knew what the blind men wanted. Jesus still wanted to give them a voice and some control and some ownership of, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
Is it I'm trying to think, maybe it's in John where, oh shoot, I'm so sorry. I'll be right back. Sorry, just a sec.
Time out.
Hey, Dan, I got one for you. There's a joke going around in Germany. Do you know what borders insanity?
No.
Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Kathy saw something on Facebook. I don't know if you follow Facebook. I don't.
Yeah.
Kathy saw on Facebook a post. I may not say it right. You might have to help me, but something about let's show Trump
Yep.
exactly what happens on the pandemic, and that you lose your job and you lose your house.
Oh man, what did I miss?
Oh, what borders on insanity?
So much.
No,
It's a
Canada and Mexico.
And then
That's pretty
I was
good.
saying, there's a Facebook post that let's show Trump what it's like to really be affected by the pandemic, and you lose your job and you lose your house.
I saw that one too. I saw that one too. Sorry, I apologize. Voss Lighting is here to fix the lights over the baptismal font today. So I apologize. And Julie is at she's still recovering from her knee surgery. She's coming in, but she's kind of at the mercy of her husband and mom's schedules. And so she's able to come in when they can drive her. She tried driving the other day and she said it's a really good thing they live in the country. So
How that goes.
she didn't have to run into anything too dangerous. But so that unless there was anything else that really Dan, I think that was a great thing that you pointed out, that Jesus gives these men the ownership of their healing and their give them some agency. That was the word I was looking for. It gives them some agency in their care. Was there anything else in this text that really jumped out? Like I said, today may be a little shorter because we're kind of just wrapping up loose ends. But was there anything else that jumped out in this text to you all? Or anything that you take away from it?
I think for me the biggest takeaway is the whole servant thing.
Mhm.
The greatest will be the least, and the least the greatest, and just his another time where he's trying to change their thinking from the way it has been into this new way. So
Yeah. And how prevalent that still is, back when maybe this is before the pandemic, but you talk about, well, what's the best movie? Well, let's look at the top box office, because obviously the biggest must be the best. What show is the best? Well, what has the best ratings? You look at different things. Even, I'm a food and wine geek, but you talk to wine folks, and depending on what circles you're in, they absolutely hate the whole, oh my gosh, what's his name? Parker. He's the guy that the Spectator, the editor of Wine Spectator, that created the whole numerical scoring system. When you go into a grocery store and the wine bottle says 91 points. Man, wine people hate that. Because they're like, how do you know? Maybe you don't like the taste of it. Maybe they do. Maybe, because we're all different. Yeah. But who says it's great? But we so often look for the biggest, the best, the flashiest, what's the most important job? The one that gets paid the most. What's the best movie? The one that rakes in the most money. Who's the greatest leader? Well, the one who's the one out there saying, I'm the best, the loudest. But Jesus,
the one that's got the most followers. The one that has the most followers.
Oh yeah. And what an interesting, we live in a time, especially thinking about like Twitter and Instagram, and you have so many of the social media where it's described as followers. And we look at who has the social influencers, to see who has the most followers and the most power. But I don't know that Mother Teresa would have been that social media savvy. I don't know. Maybe Jesus might have. I don't know. But yeah, I think Jesus is definitely encouraging us. I think you're right. Now, maybe more than ever, is a good time to really hear that call to servant leadership. I think that's a great thing to stick out. For me, Dan, I really appreciated what you were saying about that we need to ask God. That this is a reminder, take a look at those two blind men, and that, sometimes we need to ask Jesus for what it is that we need, or what it is that we think we need. And that's okay too. Any other takeaways? Anything else that really sticks with you in this text?
Well, I think that some people are just afraid to ask Jesus for what they need. He's the all-powerful, so I'm just a humble little person out there in the crowd. What gives me the right to ask him for something?
And I think too, Ron, I think there's a weird, there is a tension in our scriptures, right? Where we are supposed to be humble, but yet we aren't supposed to allow, and we are supposed to turn the other cheek, but God doesn't want any of us to be just trampled on and abused and dehumanized. In the same way that here we see Jesus saying, well, tell me, what is it that you want? But we also know that God isn't Santa Claus just waiting for our wish list to grant every little thing we want. We even see Jesus as, in a few weeks, we'll hear Jesus's prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, where, not my will, but thy will. So it is a weird tension that there are times, and how do we discern when we need to be giving voice to God through our prayers of saying, God, I need this, or I want this, and yet still maintaining that thy will, not my will kind of thing. How do you balance that, or where do you see that balance?
Balance between what again?
Being able to directly ask God, like Jesus tells these two men, tell me what you need, tell me what you want, and not treating God as Santa Claus, as somebody that we just ask for our wish list, and if it happens, then our prayers were heard, and if it doesn't happen our way, then we believe that God didn't hear us.
Well, you got to be able to think what's important. You got to be able to know what is important and what is not important on the wish list. A wish list is just what it is. It's something that you want, but which of the ones are that important? And don't ask for something that's not, frivolous, and ask for something that is important. And to the blind men, they did.
I think you're right, Ron. There has to be some evaluation and self-evaluation on what you might ask for and what your motive is for asking it. So maybe that would help.
I think that's great. This has been a rich dialogue. I think everybody has added some good stuff to help seek, and I think these are, I got to be honest, when I was putting this together, I was like, it's not a whole lot here, but we got into some really important stuff and some very timely concepts that I hope help you in your faith as we see the importance of humility and knowing the difference between wants and needs, the desire that God has of us to be servant leaders, and the ways that we support servant leaders and advocate for servant leaders. So absolutely. Well, next week we'll be hopping into Jerusalem. We'll be waving some palms, riding on donkeys, stealing some, borrowing some colts. So we'll see how it all goes down next week. But thank you all. Would anybody be willing to close us out with a little bit of prayer today? How about I'll do it. I'll do it. God help us. So often we desire the big, the flashy, the loud, the places of honor, the titles, and the acclaim. Help us remember that we are called to be followers of Jesus, that we are called to be servant leaders, that you give us what we need, maybe not always what we want, but always what we need, and what is good and what is liberating. Help us receive those things and to be grateful for all that we have, to see the abundance of blessings that you've already given us and that you are waiting to bestow on us. And help us be patient and loving and hopeful and kind in these days. We pray this in your Son's name, and through his Spirit we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you all. We will see you next week. And take care.
Are we going to have the get together, the Zoom thing tonight, since the debate is on?
What time